Thank you for inviting me in this that webinar. So it is based on the presentation I made to the Women in Data Science in Maastricht on March 23, so a few days ago, and I've added with more detail for AIDAVA because we're going much deeper than what I presented in Maastricht. So maybe important to know, when I stopped 3 years ago to work with big corporation, I really wanted to focus on something that was very close to my heart, which is personal health data sharing. And I realized pretty soon that there is no value in sharing what I would call garbage data. And while there are many organizations that are working on improving data quality and interoperability, I could not find any good solution that would allow a citizen, meaning me in that title there, to control my health data and improve the quality of those data before I would actually share them. And at the end of the day, I'm the most interested to have high quality health data for me. So data for the common good, but what about me, seems a very egocentric title. It is not. First, we need to put this in perspective of what is happening at the EU level. And then I will demonstrate why focusing on me first is certainly the most effective approach toward contributing to the common good. So I will first quickly give you some background on the EU regulation around DGA and EHDS. Then I would like to bring you to approach data curation that may be clear to many of you because that's what we do in AIDAVA, but I think it's important to clarify the concept and why we are different. And then I will go through AIDAVA. It's a very high-level presentation that, well, 2 slides that you know, but then I would like to go a little bit more in depth in what was discussed last week with Ramsey at the Work Package 5 workshop in Sofia. And then I would like to conclude about but what is next? What do we do with AIDAVA? How does that help to what I call just-in-time data for the common good? Can go next and one more next. Yes, one more, thank you. So we've all heard about GDPR, which entered in regulation in May 2018. The European Commission has developed since multiple white paper in blue, directives in pink, and mostly regulation in orange. You can see that there's quite many that have been published lately. And I would like to actually go quickly through 3 of them. The first one is the data strategy. The second one is the Data Governance Act. And finally, the third one is the European Health Data Space, which has been published as a draft in May 2020 and is now under revision by the European Parliament. Next one. So about the European Data Strategy, which was approved in 2020, it is based on 4 pillars. The first one is, and the objective, of that EU data strategy from the Commission is to foster a single market for data within the European Union while respecting fundamental rights. And this includes improving access to high quality data for research and innovation. The high quality data is quite important because that's really the challenge. And the data strategy is not just for health, it's obviously cross-sectorial. And so the 4 pillars are, as you can see in the slide, first, a governance framework, which goes across all sectors. And it includes basically 2 regulations. The first one that we're going to discuss a bit more in the next slide is the Data Governance Act, or the DGA. The second pillar is about infrastructure and making sure we have all the cloud and data store that we need. The third one, which is important, I'll speak a little bit about it later, is development of the right competencies, including digital skills and data literacy, which the European Commission thinks, and rightly so, very important to build a data strategy. And then the last one is a set of sector-specific data spaces, which are establishing data sharing frameworks for different domains. It includes healthcare, finance, mobility, energy, and the idea is to support data-driven innovation and digital transformation with those sectors. And in that one, around the data space, the first one is the European Health Data Space, EHDS, which is quite important in our context. So let me dig down through those two, one, the DGA and the EHDS. Next one. The DGA certainly more know, Dominique, to you, because it's quite important for the data operator. So the Data Governance Act has main objective to leverage the potential of data for the economy and society, but to do that in a regulated way. As you can see, it's not just for health, it's across everything. It's in the mindset of the regulator, it was more focused at sharing public health data, but it completely applies as well to personal data, certainly personal health data. And I would like to explain you two of the pillars, because this is some of the concepts you may retrieve in what we're doing with data intermediary in AIDAVA, but also the second pillar, which is data altruism, which is for some what is called the common good. So let's go to the next slide, please. So in the Data Governance Act, which was approved by the Parliament in December 2021, they define those two concepts, data sharing and data altruism. Data sharing through data intermediary, in that case, it's data sharing for specific purpose with dynamic consent based on the purpose on each of the requests that could actually work through what the Commission is now setting in place, which is an EU digital wallet. In that context, it's possible to link data across data sources with consent, and that gives a complete view of the individual because we can link our data. In Pillar 2, citizen keeps control because it gives consent for a specific purpose. So there is value for the citizen and for the data user. Pillar 3, which is related to data altruism, a citizen or other organization are expected to actually donate their data. And there would be a consent once at the moment of donation. Because the data are donated and know how, and then often, well, typically pseudonymized, there is no lawful linkage which is permitted across the data sources. So what it gives when it's personal data, it's only a partial view of the individual. And you will see later why that is not good. On top of that, citizen loses control because he has donated his data. When the data are donated, they are gone. They are donated, he does not have any control anymore. And so there is value for data user, but there is no value for citizen. One click, please, or maybe you can go 3 clicks. So yes. So the data intermediary is the basis for what we have been considering thinking in the health data intermediary in AIDAVA. But by the way, it's also very much what is being considered as important in the organization. People like Dominique and myself and others are very much involved, which is the My Data Global. There are more than health data intermediaries. There are more and more data intermediaries around mobility, about finance. So the health data intermediary is just about health data. So it's not a specific concept. No, data altruism is what is currently proposed for secondary data use in EHDS, as I will expand in a minute. But one more click. The question you can ask, what is the common good? Is it delivered through data sharing, or is it best delivered through data donation? And that's where the EHDS that you will see the next slide has already taken a decision, which may not necessarily be approved by everybody. So in the EHDS, the objective by the European Commission website is to support individuals to take control, remember that, of their own health data, and to support the use of health data for better clinical care, better research, and better policy making. The intention is very good. It's not necessarily realized as it's now in the regulation. So, and I'm going to summarize for you a few points which are important for this talk out of 148 pages document, which is quite hard to read, but it's worth. Frankly, it's worth. I would encourage you to read if you believe it's important. So, and I'm going to oversimplify, obviously, but the EHDS is separated the world in two. The first that you can see on the slide is the world of clinical care primary use that they call at EU level My Health at EU. Then they want to define national, what they call national contact points for digital health, who are going to coordinate at the national level the information about the patient. It is an organization that needs to be certified in each member state. It is an organization that will centralize all the patient data and will be accessible by the patient and the care providers. You can consider that kind of a public health data intermediaries, but it's only to actually allow patients to access the data, which is very good, but is that good enough? Important in primary care, primary use, they also want to put in place a catalog of data source. That's something that may ring a bell, because that's also something we think it's very important to put in AIDAVA. And another important component in that environment is that they want to support cross-border requests of patient data, so that as a citizen, I can use my data across Europe. One more click. So secondary use, so that second part of the EHDS world is secondary use research, which they called health data at EU. And there, they intend to actually put in place what they call health data access bodies. And I'm sure that's a term you will see more and more, HDAB, or the National Contact Point, and CDPH. So those terms will come more and more because they are quite important in moving forward with the regulation. But so those bodies will be within at the national level. They will support requests by data users. So I'm a public organization, or I'm an approved private company. I can ask an health data access body to manage my requests. Something which is quite important and not very good, and really a problem for many people, is that those health data access body will have the permit to process my data. So it's not that I can give consent. They will have the permit to process my data. And as a patient, I will be able to check on the public website, if I can find it, what is happening with my data. Obviously, this is not very much in favor of many data protection authority, because it's permit-based and not consent-based. The good thing is that it allows authorities to move forward quite fast, for example, in the context of pandemics. But between nothing and permit, there may be interim solution like opt-out, for example. And so there's a lot of discussion about, from data protection authority, about saying that is not acceptable. Another thing that I think is also quite important in the context of health data for EU is that they want to reuse the possibility of secondary data sets. So they want to build a catalog of data sets, which are basically derived data sets. And they also want to allow cross-border requests of those data sets, which are very nice. But the fact that it's permit-based is really a concern. So maybe one more click. So again, a lot of very good things. Frankly, the good thing about EHDS, it is there. There's a lot of fantastic components, but there are two concerns. Main concern. The first one is that it's focusing very much on capturing clinical care data. There is no mention about social determinant of health. There is no mention of including as well clinical trial data. And if I participate to a clinical trial data, I also want to have my data from clinical trial in my record, because sometimes they may be as important, if not more, than what I have in my clinical record. And also, if we capture genomic, that should be linked with whatever is in the medical record. And as I already mentioned, one of the major concerns is the secondary use is based on data altruism with permit and not on consent. One more click. So in the purpose of EHDS, they have defined the common good as data donation. And for me, and I will try to explain to you, it is the most inefficient way to develop personal health data sharing for the common good, independently of the consent of the permit. On top of that, it's the worst from a data quality perspective. So let's explain why I think it's the worst case scenario. If you can go to the next slide, and then to stay true, we need to actually look at different approach on data curation. You see here, it's the approach that is basically what is going to happen with data altruism, is what I call vertical curation. And one of my challenges, by the way, is to find the right term. Vertical versus horizontal, as you will see, they might be better terms, but let's go through the concept. So we have raw data, which are spread across different systems. They are heterogeneous, different shape and different form. They are identifiable because obviously when you collect them, they need to identify me, but they only represent each of them a partial view of me. Next. When you actually want to curate the information, you basically take extract from those different data sets, and they are pseudonymized. And because they are pseudonymized, they can be pooled, they can be standardized, but there is no linked view on me, which means that you get suboptimal analytics, and you need many more subject or extract to actually be able to make sense of the data. One more click. But also, when there is another analytic domain, the needed data for that new domain is often different than what was already curated and made available before, and therefore we need to curate again, and one more, and sometimes we curate again and again those different data sets for different purposes. So one more, we curate those data. One more click, please. So we curate data many times and use those data only once. And then, best case, we dump them when analytic is done. But worst case, we archive those secondary data sets because we spend so much time to create them and we don't actually want to lose them in case of. So in short, this is the current process, but it is not efficient and it is not sustainable. So what do we suggest and what do we basically want to do in AIDAVA? Go next slide. It's what I call horizontal curation. Now we start from the same data sets, again, spread across system, heterogeneous, identifiable, and still a partial view of me. Next one. So what we want to do with AIDAVA is first to recompose me. Now you can see that those little guys from the different data sources, they had data about my head, data about my body, data about my arms, and data about my legs. And now, by bringing all those together and curate them, you can see that these are all about me. Those data on top of that would be interoperable, and I'll explain that in a minute. And mostly, they represent a complete view of me. Once more, and you can go maybe several times. So whenever you actually need to have a curated data set, you can actually get the same thing, but much faster. And in that case, they would be, again, pooled, standardized, and pseudonymized. But they would be linked because it's coming from an extract of me. And so you can actually have just-in-time publishing with dynamic consent of much higher quality data. And you can do that 2 or 3 times more. Please, Svetla. So you can do that many times and once more. And this what I call curate once, use many times. So we curate once at the level of the patient with the level of the support of the patient and by the patient as much as possible. And then whenever it's needed, it is, because it's reusable, interoperable, you can actually create that, what I call just in time. Next slide. No, is this realistic? And I know certainly in AIDAVA there has been a lot of questions about, no, is that a myth or reality? Is it really realistic to ask the patient to fully curate their data as if they were data scientists? Well, obviously, it's not a realistic option, but it's clear that patient can and want to contribute. So what is the way forward? Well, first, it's definitively about skills. And you may have heard about the Digital Compass of Europe. It's basically some of those strategic objectives they want to achieve. And by 2030, first, they want all EU citizens to have access to their health record. That's the first thing. But a health record, which is not good quality, is definitively not enough. So that's why tools like AIDAVA will be extremely useful. But, and not to be underestimated, they expected that there will be 20 million skilled IT specialists. And some of those ones would be able to support patients. So the fact that the Commission wants to increase health literacy, digital literacy, is definitively a good path into the direction of AIDAVA. but it is not enough. And that's why, one more click, please. No matter what, you can have the best skills on earth. If you don't have the right tools, it's not going to help. And that's where we want to develop in AIDAVA tools that will maximize automation in data curation and simplify the task for the patient or the delegate. So let's go to AIDAVA. The first two slides I'm going to show you, you know them. Can you click 2 times, please? So how do we do with that fantastic tool, which is going to help me to create my data? So you know this. So we would go to heterogeneous data source, click, which is going to generate a personal knowledge graph, which is basically my longitudinal record. It's me. One more click. Something important is that, because you may ask, how is it possible that that knowledge graph is going to be interoperable and reusable? It is because it is going to be completely constrained by a reference ontology, which is going to be based on standard like SNO, METLOG, and all those ones. But that's make the personal knowledge graph, my record, completely interoperable and reusable because it's completely constrained by that ontology. Out of that knowledge graph, I can create anything, well, many different outputs, and one of them would be the common good. Next one. No, in AIDAVA, as you know, the challenge here is not if we can do this. We know we can deliver personal knowledge graph. The challenge is how much we can automate by orchestrating multiple AI tools. And if you go to the next slide, and maybe we can go quickly on the next one because it's a, so we want to go from those differences. Go and build the slide up to you see the patient, Svetlana, thank you. The slide after are more important. So we want to actually have those personal health and data source. No, that's too fast. Go back, thank you. Who are going to create the personal knowledge graph. Thank you. All of which we are going to have those curated data, identify pseudo-anonyms. And there are a lot of tools, as you know, in the backend. And whenever the backend is in trouble and does not actually automate, then there would be the human in the loop front end where the patient and data steward will actually be asked to contribute. The challenge of AIDAVA is not to transform data source into a personal health knowledge graph. It is to maximize automation through the workflows I just mentioned to you in the transformation so that we can minimize human intervention. Next one. No, to come back to the key topic of the main topic of this, so now, what does it mean to have just-in-time data for the common good? So if you can go to the next one. The first one, obviously, is to keep collecting the data from primary use in clinical care, clinical research. And one thing, we need to enrich those data sources with fair metadata, but more than data. We want to add metadata that will maximize automation and curation. For example, if we know the file is English narrative, it will go faster to call the NLP English a tool. If it's in Estonian, we would need to call an NLP Estonian tool. So we could scan the text, but if we know that in advance, it's much faster to actually do that. And if we know a tool is using specific standard, it will go faster. So we keep collecting the data, but the idea is that we need to add metadata to maximize automation. Then what we'll do is what we do in AIDAVA, integrate and curate once into a personal health knowledge graph for each individual, and actually have that managed through DGA in time, as health data intermediary per the Data Governance Act. And obviously, I put semi-automated curation, the more we can have, the best. Next one. When you have that for each individual, then it's possible to do federated data discovery, because you can actually go in all those interoperable, reusable personal health knowledge graph to actually build population data set with dynamic consent through that EU digital wallet. And you can also put in place a catalog of those secondary data sets that will support regeneration and refresh. If I've updated my data with new information, it may be useful to actually add that into the population data set. So if I've mapped good quality at the individual level, generate population level for the common good, will be just in time and much more efficient, almost automated. And last but not least, for people like you that like our planet, I think it's probably, as you probably know, that 14% of the greenhouse gas effect in 2030 will be due to computer center, and a big part of that, data center, a big part of that is due to health data. So what it would be quite useful, it would be potentially to dispose secondary data set if they are reproducible and refreshable, and if it's acceptable from a data compliance, regulatory compliance perspective. And that would definitely help to decrease the greenhouse gas effect of those data centers. So next slide, to come back and to conclude, to come back to my title and to conclude, the best way I, as an EU citizen, can support the common good in healthcare is to start by me, by my personal data, by maximizing the quality and agreeing to share them in trust based on consent. And so that is concluding my talk.